Hi, I'm Jo Munday and welcome to Videos That Get Clients, a podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners and coaches, and anyone really who wants to use video to really connect with their clients in an authentic way and create a strong relationship with them from the start and ultimately to generate more sales. And this applies whether you want to make your own videos or perhaps work with someone who can help you create that video. In this audio, I'm going to be sharing some tips on how best to make the most of what you have if you're filming yourself. How can you maximise what you have and present yourself in the best way? And also to minimise any distractions or things that might put your audience off. Before we go into the specifics, I just want to share one of my favourite quotes with you by Ottawa Keys, an illusionist. He said, "When it comes to the requirements for pleasing an audience, all the knowledge and instruction and apparatus in the world is worth less than 1 ounce of soul." So this really taps into what I was talking about in the earlier audios about the importance of really connecting with your audience and being yourself and letting your true self really shine through, because that's the thing that's going to stick with people. And if you get that right, then kind of technical slight issues or imperfections will kind of be forgiven. So that's really your starting point for any video that you want to make that creates a big impact. But having said that, there are several things that you can do to optimize how you look and how you sound, and also to make sure that the person watching you is really focused on you and your message and not something strange in the background or fuzzy sound or any of those things. I'm going to look at some equipment options for you, as well as things like framing your shot, how best to position yourself if you're filming yourself, or even if you're being interviewed, lighting options, and making the most of the sound available to you. I'm also going to briefly touch on editing basics and a basic introduction to how editing works. So I would say if you are starting out filming yourself and you don't really know kind of where to turn or what to do, I would say actually using a smartphone and perhaps buying a few add-ons which will improve the performance of it is a really good place to start, because lots of smartphones have HD video and they are really, the cameras on the smartphone, such as the iPhone 6 or the Samsung Galaxy S6, these are really good quality, and I think they can produce a good result. If you're just filming yourself talking to camera, they're nice and simple to use, and there are various ways to improve the quality of those. So to keep the image stable, there are lots of mini tripods you can buy as attachments to hold your phone in place. The Gorilla Pod by Joby, which is a great little kind of twisty thing that you can either just sit on top of your desk or even sort of clamp it to a bookcase or something like that. It's a very versatile little gadget, and that will hold your camera in place. Just make sure that it's level so you're not kind of on an angle when you're being filmed. Another option is to use a selfie stick actually, and you might have to try sort of different lengths so that you get the optimum length for you, but that's something, if you're happy to kind of talk and hold it still with the selfie stick, that could be a good option. Obviously it's more to think about than just having a mini tripod, so I'd probably go for the mini tripod for choice, so that just to minimize what you're having to think about while you're recording yourself. And finally, there's quite a lot of plug-in microphones on the market now, which will improve the quality of the sound that you record from your phone. A great little one is the Rode Smart Lav Plus, which is a little lapel mic, which is basically one of those small mics that you can clip onto your shirt or your jacket and plug it into your phone, and it'll pick up the sound from your voice much more clearly, and it won't pick up so much of the room that you're in because it's quite a directional mic, so it really zoom in on the sound of your voice. And I think something like that is about £40-50 on Amazon, so you don't have to spend a fortune to improve the quality of your iPhone and really get quite a good result. And you can even get a small LED panel, a small LED light panel, which can clip onto the top of your phone, and that will just give you another lighting option if you're perhaps filming in a dark room. And again, none of these items are particularly expensive, and combined they'll be more cost effective than a bespoke video camera. If you do think you're going to be filming quite a lot and you'd like to buy an actual video camera, a good middle of the road option is the Canon Legria. It's kind of a good all-rounder, I would say. If you want to go slightly higher quality than that, there's what I often use is the Canon DSLR cameras, which were originally designed for stills photography, but they actually perform really, really well as video cameras. Nikon also do some high quality DSLR cameras as well. And starting at about £600, they offer really good value for money for the quality of films that they produce. It's kind of like how long's a piece of string. For example, with a DSLR camera, if you start to get into it, you'll realise that you'll need to invest more in a high quality lens rather than the standard lens that comes with the camera. And that will give you more options if you're filming in darker situations, or you want something called a shallow depth of field, which is where you're in focus and everything in the background is out of focus. The more you're prepared to spend, the more options you'll get and the better result you'll get. But if you're filming in a well-lit room, then the standard lens actually performs quite well. So now you've got your camera set up, what are you going to be filming? One thing I notice a lot of when people film themselves is that they try to get a really plain background and they often stand against a wall. And this isn't great because it's quite flat, and often you get a sort of ugly shadow. You get your shadow falling onto the wall, and it just looks quite uninspiring, and it's quite sort of brutal and clinical looking. To make yourself stand out, actually stand quite far away from your background. So that might mean standing by the window and having the rest of the room in shot. This will mean you're more of the centre of attention, the background is further away, and it will be slightly more out of focus, and it will ensure that you are the centre of attention, you are the centre of focus for the image rather than the background. Having said that, you will need to basically tidy that room and keep it as simple as possible to avoid it looking too cluttered and then being a distraction for a different reason. So if you've got a room that's sort of neutrally decorated, bookshelves are fine, but if it's overloaded with paper, just take some of those papers off. Just make sure there's clean lines. A plant always looks quite nice. We don't want to see used newspapers or bottles of water or any kind of detritus that might be floating around your house. If you've got loads of sort of ornaments on your table, I would sort of remove most of them, maybe leave one or two. But basically anything that might distract the audience, that they might think, oh, what's that? And then they're kind of thinking about that rather than you. Just remove it. The barer the better, although as I say, completely bare white wall is a bit too clinical. So if possible, have a nice plant there next to you, in the background behind you. But make sure it's not kind of positioned so it's coming out, looks like it's coming out the back of your head. Have it in the background but to one side so that you can see it in full rather than it competing with what's going on around you. Equally, don't have any kind of light stands or anything basically that would look like it's coming out of the top of your head, because again, that's quite distracting. Another really important feature when you're framing your shot is to think about headroom. Now, headroom is the distance between the top of your head and the top of the shot. And lots of people make the mistake of leaving that space too big. So there's this enormous gap between the top of their head and the top of the shot. And it basically just makes you look small and lacking authority. So if anything, have your head literally touching the top of the shot. You can even chop the very top of your head off. That would be better than having way too much of a gap. As a general rule, you can get away with being closer to the camera than you think you can. So a nice head and shoulders shot where you can see the top of your shoulders and your head, and then ending the shot just above your head would be perfect. And watch out for anything slightly unattractive like light switches or anything like that next to you. So now you've got your shot framed, have a think about where you're looking, where your eye line is. And the best thing is to make sure that the camera is at the same height as your eye line. Basically, if you're looking down or if you're looking up, it's not as engaging as if you're looking right into the lens at the same height. That will maximise your chances of developing that connection. It's a bit distancing if you're looking downwards or looking up. And if you're being interviewed and someone is sitting next to the camera interviewing you, make sure both the camera and the interviewer are both at the same eye line, which is the same as yours. So everyone's at the same eye line, you, the interviewer, and the camera. So you've got the camera positioned and the framing of the shot done. Now let's think about the lighting. As you are the most important part of the shot, your face needs to be lit the most. That's why the little LED panels on the iPhone can be great, because they create what we call the key light. The key light is the strongest light source, and it should be shining on your subject, which is basically you. So a lot of videographers will use a window as their main light source, because the sun is much more powerful, even on a grey day, than any artificial light. So if you have a window, as a rule of thumb, it's best to have that as your key light. So be looking at the window as you're being filmed. It's then shining onto your face and lighting it up and making sure you're the main focus of the shot. Once that is in place, it's fine to have something like a lamp on in the background, because that can be what you call your backlight. And in the industry, we use a 3-point lighting technique, which is basically 3 lights. One, your key light, which is your strongest light, the main light on your face. The next one is the backlight, which is a light behind you, which basically brings a light onto your back, onto your shoulders and your hair, and it basically helps you to stand out against your background. So that could be a lamp to the side and behind you, or it could perhaps be a smaller window if your room has more than one window. And finally, the third light, which is the least important light, and often is not one that I would actually use when filming, is the fill light, which is a light to the side of you, and that just makes sure the light's just evenly cast on your face and there aren't any harsh shadows. But if you've only got one light, make sure that's the key light and make sure that's shining on you. And then if possible, have some kind of light in the background so it lights up the background a little bit and creates a nice silhouette around your shoulders and hair. And the last thing to think about is sound. So as I mentioned, there are lots of plug-in microphones for your smartphones, which are really quite effective and easy to use. But there are some general principles of sound above and beyond getting a good microphone. And that basically revolves around reducing the echo as much as possible in the room. When you speak, the sound bounces off the floor, the ceiling, and the walls before it bounces back onto the microphone. So there are ways to minimise the amount of sound waves bouncing back onto the microphone and creating that echo. One is to film in a room which doesn't have too high ceilings, because if you've got very high ceilings, the sound is travelling further and then will bounce back at more of a delay, and then you'll hear more of an echo. It's also best to film in a carpeted room, because carpets absorb more sound, whereas wooden floors, you'll create that bouncing of sound waves again. So basically, carpets and soft furnishing absorb sound, whereas hard surfaces will create that bouncing and echo effect. So ideally, film in a room that has lots of soft furnishings, carpets. If you haven't got many soft furnishings, but you like the look of the room that you want to film in, bring in a load of cushions from another room and have them out of shot underneath you, so at least you're creating a bit more sound absorption close to the microphone. Have a few goes at it, get some feedback from your friends, and just get to a point where you're feeling relaxed and it's a perfectly natural thing to do to record yourself. It can be strange to listen to your voice and see yourself on camera to start with, but remember, everyone feels that. I haven't met anyone yet who hasn't had some kind of insecurity about what they look like or what they sound like. So it's perfectly natural, and it doesn't mean that you don't look or sound good. So I would say try and ignore those little insecurities as much as possible and just post what you have to share, because I'm sure it will be useful and beneficial for someone. If you're presenting to camera and you're doing a short top tip or talking about your business and what you offer, sometimes you can get away without editing the video if you have a good take. If you are interested in exploring editing a bit further, iMovie for Macs is a nice simple editing software to use. I use Premiere Pro by Adobe, which is a more professional video editing software. It has more features, but if you're interested in exploring that, you can get a subscription for about £20 a month on Adobe's Creative Cloud, which gives you software such as Photoshop, Illustrator, as well as Premiere Pro. If you just want to have a play with it, you can basically get their newest versions of those software on a monthly basis rather than paying hundreds of pounds for the software as a one-off. There are great video tutorials for video editing on YouTube, so if you are interested in exploring it, then I would say YouTube is a great place to start for that. If you've been interviewed by someone, you'll want to cut out the interviewer's questions, or if you're filming yourself, you might want to cut out some stumbles, or perhaps you've gone on longer than you wanted to. And really, cutting is the main feature of editing, removing that which doesn't add to what you're offering. So what you're left with is something that's really powerful and immediate and gets to the point nice and quickly. So if you've got one camera and you need to cut bits out, there are various ways stylistically to show that cut or hide that cut. A jump cut is an obvious jump between one section of the conversation and the next. An alternative popular way to do a cut is to do a fade to black. So you finish one section of the conversation and you fade away to a black screen before you come back up to the next shot, the next part of the conversation. And finally, you have what's called cutaways. So to hide any cut between one section of the conversation and the next, you would add over the top of that a shot of perhaps you in action in your business, talking to a client. Those kind of shots that give you an overall impression of what it's like to work with you, what your business is all about. Or perhaps you want to use screen capture, for example, you can put shots of your computer screen to demonstrate something that you're talking about. And something like QuickTime on Mac is a useful program that enables you to capture anything on the computer screen. Or Camtasia is another great program for doing that. But if all that sounds like too technical and too complicated, don't worry about it. Just keep your videos nice and short and do it all in one take, and that's fine. That will give that authenticity across, and you can practice as many times as you want. If you'd like any more tips or information on creating your video, feel free to reach out to me and get in touch. I love to be able to help answer your questions. My email address is jo@jo-munday.com, jo-munday.com, and my website is www.jo-munday.com. Good luck with your video, enjoy making it, and I'll hopefully speak to you soon. Bye bye.